Breaking news out of Pfizer this morning. The company says it has completed its phase 3 trial of the COVID vaccine candidate, and it plans to file for emergency use authorization in the U.S. within just days. Pfizer says the vaccine has now shown to be 95% effective, an increase from that initial 90% it reported last week. And they say that rate was consistent across all demographics. They say they did not observe any serious safety concerns, and it expects to make up to 50 million doses this year and 1.3 billion in 2021. Canada has already placed orders with Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech for 20 million doses of two-dose vaccine. Well, Canada has also ordered up to 56 million doses of the vaccine candidate from Moderna. The prospect of 2 vaccines being ready by January has Ottawa looking at the logistics of distributing them. The Pfizer vaccine needs to be kept at minus 70 degrees Celsius. The federal government has already bought several medical freezers. It's now putting plans in place for transporting and storing all those doses.
That will involve multiple government agencies, possibly private contracts as well, may well involve the Canadian Armed Forces.
The federal plan also calls for vulnerable populations and frontline health workers to be a priority once vaccines are ready. If it all goes according to schedule, most Canadians could be vaccinated by the end of 2021. We're joined now by Dr. Samir Gupta. He is a respirologist and associate professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of Toronto, and he's joined us from Toronto. Good morning, sir. Thanks again for your time. Let's talk about Pfizer announcing this morning it's completed its phase 3 trial. It's saying their vaccine 95% effective, and they also plan to file for emergency use authorization in the U.S. within days. What's your assessment of how significant this is?
We got the preliminary news over a week ago from Pfizer, then we got the news from Moderna. So there's a bit of a back and forth between these two companies, but both vaccine candidates are very promising. Obviously, we want to see a bit more of the nitty gritty. We want to see the paper published, which really shows us the data and talks about the efficacy and also the safety stuff. But the stuff that they've released is very promising. Some of the early questions we had about the Pfizer vaccine, based on what they initially released, was, for example, are elderly people protected as well as younger people? They seem to have answered that question, and they're looking at subgroups and saying that it seems like elderly are very effectively protected, nearly the same, about 94%. So very similar to the overall population, which is kind of unusual. It's surprising because, for example, in flu vaccine, we don't see nearly that level of efficacy, particularly in the elderly population, because they have a harder time mounting that immune response. The other thing they've told us is that it does seem to protect against severe cases as well. So that was a question, was it protecting just against mild sort of flu-like illness, or was it also protecting people from getting really sick? They seem to have indicated that indeed the protection is extended to preventing severe cases, which is also very encouraging.
So, yeah, broad types of cases, all ages, all demographics as well. So let's talk about the fact now, 2 potential vaccines that Canada has access to. The public health officer saying that most Canadians could, and emphasis on could, be vaccinated by the end of 2021. Is that a timeline that makes sense to you?
I mean, I think it's a hopeful timeline. I do think that it's hard to imagine that could actually happen. A lot would need to happen for that to become a reality. The first piece is, will we get enough vaccine? As we heard on that segment, we will have about 50 million doses worldwide available of the Pfizer vaccine, but by the end of the calendar year, and they're saying they can produce 1.3 billion in all of the next calendar year. There are 8 billion people on the planet, and 60 to 70% will hopefully want this vaccine and be able to get this vaccine. So it'll have to be distributed in a way that's equitable around the world. We've talked a little bit about this before, equitable within countries in terms of who gets it first, but also we want to make sure that third world countries get it as well as first world countries. And it's better for us. It's better for the world if there's a little bit of vaccine everywhere than some countries having all of the vaccine and other countries not having it at all, in terms of the global spread of the disease and it eventually making its way back to our shores. So that's in our interest. And in fact, we've bought more vaccine, including these vaccines, than we would need for our population. But we have some obligations with the World Health Organization to give back to those countries that can't afford it. So the first thing is, will we have enough? The next thing is, will we be able to manage the logistics of rolling this out? This is a massive undertaking, and the government is talking about bringing in the military. But there are lots of logistical challenges here. One of them being obviously the very cold storage, the -70 cold storage that's required for the Pfizer product. Less of an issue for the Moderna product. It needs long-term storage at -20, but apparently once it's thawed, it will last for a month. So much less of an issue, but we'll have less of that vaccine. So we will need to figure out these cold chain dynamics that are being called around distributing this, storing it at -70 and distributing it even to rural areas in the country at -70. That's a massive undertaking. And if it's nothing like something we've ever done before. You know, the flu shot is one shot. Presumably less people get the flu shot than hopefully will want to get this vaccine. And you need 2 shots. You need to keep it really cold. And we also don't know if you might need a booster after that. So that's the other question that remains, is how durable is that immunity? The numbers they're reporting really are 1 week after the second dose of the vaccine. One of the questions is, will that be the same immunity, the same protection a month later, 6 months later, 12 months later, or will another booster be required, which will add to the complexity of distribution?
When we talk about the production of it, these, of course, is what Pfizer is saying in terms of its production line. During wartime, for example, if you're talking about a Jeep and it's a proprietary invention, other companies are then given access to create that same product. Is it possible this is what could happen with vaccines, that others step in and use this formula to produce a greater number of vaccines?
I guess it's possible. What Pfizer has said is that, the best case scenario with ramping up all of their production facilities for this is 1.3 billion doses next year. Is it possible that there are agreements made with other facilities, other companies? Maybe. But at the same time, don't forget that many of these other companies are working on their own candidate vaccine. So a more likely scenario would be, hopefully, if we're lucky, that there's a third, maybe even a fourth candidate that's successful. And so we have enough product on the basis of multiple vaccines out there on the market that would fulfill this need.
Okay. Meanwhile, though, pandemic very much in the grip. We want to ask you some comments about Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, and he's taking some heat for it. Let's have a quick listen.
If we all do what we're supposed to do, I would like to think everybody would be in green, especially before the time of Christmas.
So green meaning out of the red zone. Green, all clear by Christmas. What, 6 weeks away? Do you think that's possible, Dr. Gupta?
No, it's just not possible. I heard those comments, and there's just no statistical model or quantitative prediction that would get us there. I would love us to be there. We all want that. But, it's where we are now and where we have to be in less than 40 days. There is just no scenario in which the province will be under green zone by Christmas. One of the stats I was looking at suggested that for us to get there, the RT, or the effective reproductive number for the virus, the number of people who are infected by each actively infected person, would need to be 0.74 or lower for every day from here to Christmas. We haven't been below 0.76 ever since the beginning of the pandemic, even in the summer when things were going down and things looked really rosy. So that is, I really don't know where that's coming from. I think optimism is a great thing, but optimism attached to a plan is a great thing. The plan has to be test, trace, isolate. The plan should have been 2 months ago when experts were calling for a shutdown, when we were starting to see this dramatic increase, particularly in young people. And that didn't happen. The chief medical officer didn't recommend that. And here we are. We're having to shut down anyways. The shutdown will have to be longer. It'll be more painful. It'll be more impactful on our economy. And we've waited for more than 1,000 people to die before we've done what we should have done 2 months ago. So hope is not a strategy. Hope attached to an evidence-based, logical, science-based strategy is what I would have loved to have seen. And I think there's some harm that can come from just sort of saying these things and giving people false hope, but also in some ways minimizing things and putting that rose-colored glass and sort of making it sound like everything's fine. It's not fine. People have to make fundamental changes to what they're doing right now, and people have to take this really seriously if there's any chance for us to ever get back to green zone.
Thanks for this, Dr. Gupta. Dr. Samir Gupta in Toronto.